If you're a recruit or the parent of a recruit, you know that reaching out to college coaches is one of the most important steps in the process. But figuring out what to say to break the ice, that trips a lot of people up. And that's why I've partnered with Athlete Narrative. Athlete Narrative designed the Recruiter app to help athletes send clear, concise, and personalized emails to college coaches. Here's how it works. You start by filling out your radar page. Think of this as your digital resume. It's going to have your personal info, accolades, interests, and links to your game film. Then you use the Recruiter app to search for schools that match your interests. Once you find some schools, simply tap on a coach's name and the app will pull from your radar page to generate the perfect introductory email. All you have to do is personalize it with some quick info about why that specific school caught your attention. Then you hit send. The message goes straight from your inbox to theirs, and it's that simple. You do not need to pay thousands of dollars for an email service that might not even get results. For the same price as a month of Netflix, you can start sending emails that actually help you stand out. The recruiting process always rewards athletes who take initiative. Athlete Narrative helps you take that initiative faster. Download the app today using the link in this podcast description. It's time for Takeoff Information Superhighway. Welcome back to the Nail the Recruiting Process podcast. It's time to start the season 2 interviews. I'm thrilled about what's coming your way today, but to set the table for it, let's quickly revisit the preview podcast for the season. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, there's 2 specific things that I want you to really focus in on for today's interview. The first one is that 3.5 out of 10. If you're not familiar, what I'm referring to is 3.5 out of 10, the data point, the number on a scale of 1 to 10. College coaches do not think that the average high school athlete actually understands the day-to-day of what it looks like to be a college athlete. They scaled it at 3.5 out of 10. So the biggest thing we're doing is addressing the you don't get it component this season, right? Making sure that you understand exactly what this experience looks like at the collegiate level and making sure that you have the skills and the mentality in place to tackle those things at the high school level so you become more recruitable. That's piece 1. Now, piece 2, we're going to zero in on that mentality piece. We talked about the recruiting quadrant a little bit in that preview podcast. I want to call your attention to the bottom right of that quadrant. Attitude and engagement, AKA your motor. And obviously, college coaches have their ways to assess what your motor looks like when you're playing. But what the average high school kid and their families don't really understand is we're also assessing the actions in between the actions. How do you respond to adversity? How do you play through mistakes? How do you handle being coached? And these are all skills that can be practiced and developed. What we don't talk about nearly enough as college coaches is the actual mindset work it takes. Not just you need to do this, but what it actually looks like, what the work looks like to develop resilience, to develop those mental skills that in turn impact your motor. So I really wanted to talk about thing 1, that 3.5 out of 10, and thing 2, your motor. And this season, you're going to be hearing plenty of college coaches talking about both. But I wanted to kick it off by talking about the how. And I have good news for you, Information Superhighway. During this year's basketball season, I made a new friend. I know the fridge magnet's in the other room. I'm pumped. And this new friend happens to specialize in mental performance. Her name is Kristen Tullo. She runs Think Strong, Play Strong, and she helps athletes and the circle around athletes, coaches and parents develop mindset skills. So this is a person who literally knows how to do it. This is the person I want you hearing from first, because this is the minutia. This is what it actually looks like to build resilience. Kristin spent her whole life around sports and has been a personal fitness instructor for more than a decade. And she decided to pivot into also, I really shouldn't say pivot, she decided to also specialize in mental performance coaching. She runs an extremely successful business, and I want this podcast out because later this week, I'll actually be doing a free workshop with Kristin. So this is your opportunity to hear her talk, learn what she's all about, and then hop into a free session with the two of us at the end of this week. Here's the quick info about that session. It's called Mastering the Moments That Matter. It's going to focus deeply on coaches and parents helping their athletes build resilience and develop mindset strategies. And that free session is going to be taking place on April 24th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. I have a link below in the podcast description where you can sign up for that session. And even if you can't attend live, you should sign up and we'll send you the session recording afterwards. So the table is set. We're learning about mindset mastery from someone that's been around sports all her life, whose logo I at least think, I'm bummed I didn't ask her, but whose logo I at least think is sport inspired because it's red, white, and black after the New Jersey Devils. I think I'm gonna find a way to get follow up and report back to you next podcast. This is mandatory listening if you're trying to develop a young athlete. And if you are a young athlete, you're going to hear some uncomfortable truths in this podcast. And much like everything we're going to have you do at the next level, you're going to have to figure out a way to work through those uncomfortable truths. Why not do it by practicing some of the things you're about to learn from Kristen Tullo? Let's dive in. My newest internet friend.
What's up, Jared?
How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really, really excited for this conversation. And I also, the more we get to know each other, the more we realize we have some fun things in common. We have the future dueling piano band of Miles's, I imagine.
Yep, it has to be called Miles's.
Yeah, the Miles's. So, I'm jokes aside, really excited for this, and I want to Mission Impossible you right off the rip.
Let's go.
I've talked about this with you behind the scenes. I've talked with a lot of coaches about this over the course of my coaching career, and now being, on the other side of it. There's this space between, right? There's this space between what coaches want their athletes to do, and then this, unoccupied, rarely discussed space, and then the athletes doing it. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is going to be the first guest of mine to really get nitty gritty about that space in between. If you are ready to rock.
I've already decided by the end of this podcast, people are going to either want to work with me, like they're going to be just calling me, wanting my help, or they're going to be like, I don't want anything to do with her. So I am ready for anything. Because I'm just gonna say it how it is, how I feel, what I see, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. So that's where I'm at right now.
I love that, and I see, to me, when that's the approach, it always gets filed under quote unquote educational, right? That's the dodge.
Exactly.
So we're good.
That's the goal.
I want to start with a little bit about you, just so that our listeners can get to know you. I know you have a background in athletics. I also know that you are a strength coach. Like, you're a certified fitness instructor. I would love to know a little bit more about how this deviated into mental sport performance, which is such a needed thing for the modern scope of athletics. How did that happen for you?
Like you said, it's much needed. So yeah. I am a strength coach. I've had a personal training business for, I guess, 5 or 6 years now. I've been a personal trainer for over 10 years, working with athletes, everyone in between, youth athletes, college athletes, high school athletes, and then former athletes. What I noticed from my work in the gym and my work as a coach, I coached soccer and hockey for a number of years, was that the mental aspect of it was lacking severely. I was noticing more kids that needed help because they were crying over goals being scored on their team. And the physical aspect of it was like always the main focus. Like, everyone needs to be training in the gym. Everyone needs to be on the field a certain amount of hours a day. But meanwhile, all of these other elements are what's really crippling their ability to perform at their best. And after working with athletes and their parents and talking with other coaches for years, I just decided I want to shift a little bit and start working with these athletes and these coaches outside of the gym and outside of the game, because I think that's where the help is needed the most. And I have a background in social work. I went to school for social work. And I definitely have a background in athletics. I was an athlete, like most of us were in this field up till high school. I didn't play college. I could have had the opportunity to play soccer in college, didn't take it because I wasn't really all in on it. And I think I use what I didn't have as an athlete, and now it's kind of what I want to give to the athletes, the coaches, and the parents now.
Something that you just said that's really interesting is that you leaned into this based on your own observations. And I haven't shared this with you, but a lot of coaches know this about me. You know, when I got out of coaching and I was restricted by illness in terms of the time I could commit to work, the easy lane was, well, I'm just going to scout for colleges. And I actually turned down a lot of that work once I realized a problem area. And that problem area for me, was this huge information gap between what high school athletes thought college coaches were looking for and what college coaches were actually looking for. So then it just became bridge that information gap. I'm curious for you. You start doing this work. You're interacting with more athletes. Has something sort of jumped out to you as the problem area that you're like, if I'm known for anything, I want to be known for solving that?
I want to be known for solving the fact that mental performance, coaching, training, building is something that can be solved, right? Like confidence is not something you're born with or you don't have. It's not something that you can never find. All of these skills that I teach and I train with, they're all something that you can do on your own, right? So it's not easy, but a lot of them are going to be simple. So I always help my clients understand like mental training. It's needed, and it's something that you can train. I think that that's probably the biggest thing. Myths of that it's something that's going to take years or it's not going to happen. But I think I kind of help my clients understand that we're going to do it, and you're going to see that it's going to help immensely.
That's A, really interesting, and B, a really good jumping in point if we're going to cannonball into this. I knew you and had spoken to you at least via, text and DM a few times. Mm-hmm. And then I saw this piece of content that you posted that like jumped off the screen at me based on my own personal experiences coaching. And I had sort of convinced myself like, okay, I coach at the D3 level and I encounter different challenges. And then I'm going to go to D1 and those challenges are just going to magically not be there because I'm an idiot and I was inexperienced. And then I got there and I was like, oh, the challenges are exactly the same. Your content speaks to one of these challenges, and I'm going to quote you, okay?
Go for it.
The quote you put in this content was, your team did not lose because the other team wanted it more. They lost because they didn't know what to do when things got hard. So I want to ask you a few questions about this with the sort of disclaimer being, I'm capable of spending 9 hours on this quote. So
this piece, not to cut you off, but this post, this was posted probably a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago.
Yeah.
And I'm still getting so many notifications of people liking it or people following me from it.
It's just, it's so true. And mm-hmm. Also, me and everyone else I work with is guilty of stopping short of what you said and just saying the other team wanted it more, which is mm-hmm. actually where I want to start. So I want to boil this down to, you're clearly talking about resilience. You're clearly mm-hmm. talking about, hey, there's a difference between being resilient when things are going well for you and being resilient in winning time when both teams are peak performing. So my first question for you is, why do you think, especially with this generation of athletes, that some of that core resilience is missing?
See, this is where I said people are going to want to work with me or they're going to hate me.
Oh, let's go. That's, by the way, that is completely who I am. So I'm all in on this. Yeah.
I think a big part of it is that we allow our athletes to shy away from adversity. Things get hard. They don't want to go to practice. We're like, okay, yeah, you don't have to go today. And we don't let them fail, right? So when things are good, things are great. When things start to get harder, we shy away from it. We don't push them through it. We don't guide them through it. And this is not a shot at coaches because coaches do so much. they're only able to do so much too in their season, right? A lot of times there's not enough resources to help them, and I don't expect every coach to understand the little intricacies of helping these kids with their mental toughness. Right. So I just want to make that clear. It's a problem, but it's not anyone's real fault. But I think that we have to work on that aspect of not shying away, letting our kids fail sometimes and letting them know, like, all right, well, you know what, that sucked. I remember the first time I was coaching a hockey team and they lost in the championship, and I was happy when I saw them crying because it made me able to see that they cared and that they were going to maybe do something with that, because not everything is always going to be rosy when you're playing sports, and you have to still want to play again the next season, and keep showing up.
I'm assuming then, based on what you just shared with me, that you're going to tell me this sort of takes a village. It's not just the athlete working on something, it's the core. So my follow-up is, how can that athlete and their support network work to further developing this mindset outside of the basic be persistent? So I guess my direct question to you is, how do we, the village, help the athlete become more resilient?
I think it's a few things, right? So we have to understand, as the athlete, you have to understand what your role is. I think that's a big part of it too, right? Your kids playing a sport, they're not getting the minutes they think they deserve. They're not playing the role or the position that they maybe are used to or they want to be playing. And then we say like, oh, well, it's the coach's fault. You should be doing that. Let your kid try different roles, right? They're going to build resilience being able to find themselves in different positions that are not comfy, right? Maybe I used to play center. Now I'm being told that I have to play left wing, right? It's these little, it's not always going to be a huge thing, but it's these little things that we have to push our kids into and let them say, I'm okay being uncomfortable, and this is going to help me when things become more uncomfortable. That's part of it. Just allowing your kid to kind of sit in that and having productive conversations, knowing what to say in those situations. I think we can both agree that one of the worst and hardest things for an athlete is that ride home. Parents don't really know what to say. They might say the wrong thing inadvertently. We point out things without helping them overcome it. Of course, we notice all the mistakes our kids make. What are you doing to help them overcome that? You saw your kid fall to the ground crying in tears because his teammate got scored on, right? Did you just mention that in the car or just gloss over it? Let's have these harder conversations and open up the door to those things, right? We can't just pretend it's not happening because it's going to show up very differently. So I think all of these things, it's like it's adversity, it's challenges, and it's just being able to, you'll build the resilience when you're able to recognize it and then change it.
And I want to build on this because I think what you're saying is really, really important for other parts of the ride home circle too. My biggest regrets in this profession have very little to do with the X's and O's. I like the things that cause me to lose sleep, sometimes even 10 years removed from when it happened, are the times where I had really good intentions, but said the wrong thing to a player that I was trying to motivate. And for anyone that hasn't had this experience yet, you can tell in real time when you've shut down a kid. Like you think you have the answer. You haven't done enough research beforehand. Maybe emotions are heightened because it's like during a game or post game and you say it and then it's out there and they heard it. And as we're talking about resilience, we're talking about athletes that are already in a state where they could go either way. So I want to, put you on the spot here and direct this a little bit to coaches. Is there anything you found in your experience where you can kind of assess when the kid is in that state? The choose your next words wisely because this is going to be really, really important. Because while I agree with you that 80% of this falls on the kids, the coaches are not exempt.
Oh, absolutely not. And if I made it seem like I think anything other than that, my apologies.
You didn't, but it's my job to throw you these lobs,
Of course. But yeah, of course it has to do with the coaches too, right? And I think this could be an example of what you might be talking about. And this is a big thing just in general with my coaching and what I kind of remind athletes of their body language, right? You can tell a lot of things from people's body language. That's just one way that they're communicating with you. So when you see that kid coming off the court, the ice, the field, whatever it is, you can tell by their body language that they already have an idea things were going wrong, right? You can see where they're at. You don't need to bury them because of it. You have to just choose your words wisely. And that comes with practice too. Just like anything else that you're training these athletes for, how you talk to them is a skill that the coaches need to work on, right? So just noticing things. And I think off this podcast, me and you have talked about things. And I gave you an example of this one time. I was coaching a hockey team, and there was this one defenseman in particular that would always come off the ice and she would just make dead eye contact with me, waiting for me to point out things that she did wrong. And I knew that if I did point out things that she did wrong, I would lose her, right? And
that's all she thinks about now for the rest of the game, right? Yeah.
Right. And she's just looking at me, and I would say to her, "What's up?" And she goes, I know what you're going to say." And I'm like, "I'm not saying anything." She's like, "No, I know what you're going to say, so just say it." I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about. You know what you did wrong out there. You don't need me to say it. So like, just go back out there, fix it on the next rep." Right? It's not everything has to be a teaching moment, right? Sometimes the teaching moment is letting them sit in it, think about it, and go back out there and just fix what they already know. So I think that just kind of understanding your players is a huge advantage and can be a huge difference maker in the outcome of what you're going to get from them.
I really, really appreciate you sharing this because I feel like in very short time, we've done sort of a 360 about like, okay, if the player's in the middle of this, here's what the surrounding people can do. I want to shift our focus. We're not necessarily getting rid of the circle, but I want to shift our focus for a moment to that dot in the middle of the circle. The buzzworthy phrase in athletics for what I feel like the last quarter century has been to control the controllables, right? Easier said than done, first and foremost. But the thing I see is a lot of people that need that sort of control the controllables coaching also react with anxiousness when they're told that. And to give you an example of what I see is I see people that try to abide by that control the controllables philosophy, but the way they actually exercise it in practice is they try to control more, right? I'm not actually letting life come to me. I'm trying to increase my sphere of influence so that I'm in control of more. And that's how I control the controllables. And that's toxic and destructive and also not helpful for the individual. So what I'm getting at you, I want to learn what the actual skill development in your eyes of controlling the controllables looks and feels like.
So I'm guilty of hammering home control the controllables, and my athletes probably, and I always say, you know what I'm going to say right now. You know what I'm going to say. That's out of your control. One of the first things I do with all my athletes and my coaches is go over our controllables and our things that we can't control, right? And I make them write out columns, can control, can't control. And I give them a couple of minutes to fill out one side and then a couple of minutes to fill out the other side. And I tell them, read me all of the things that you can't control. And once they do that, I say, good, we're done with those. We're not focusing on those at all, right? Literally forget that they exist because you're never going to control these things. There's no point in you putting your energy into it. And one of them that people love to argue with me about, either on Instagram or in person, is playing time. They're like, oh no, you can control how much playing time you get by showing up to practice and doing this, doing that. And I'm like, you can influence what your coach decides on. Your coach is in control of your playing time. You can do all of these things. You still don't have control of that because I can find us in a position where we need to be really, really hard on defense right now, but you're more of an offensive player. I don't need you as much right now, right? So that's not something that you're able to control. There are things that you can influence, kind of like what you were just saying, like people start to almost like micromanage and try to influence as much as they can. But if it's not something that you yourself can change, we forget about it. So then we go through our controllables. And I honestly don't remember exactly what the question was that you gave me because I'm already on my tangent, which is what I do when I'm talking
I'm
about
digging your
things that I
tangent.
love.
I'm digging your
But
tangent. Yeah.
yeah, so then just going into the controllables and kind of breaking those down, and that's where we're going to put all of our focus, right? So how you prepare for your games, the attitude you show up with, the effort that you give, your body language, how you're communicating with your teammates. Those are all things that you are fully in control of, so you can change it at any second when you need to.
Let me first tell you, you answered the question. So great job.
Yes.
Fridge magnet on the way. And second of all, the last thing you shared is actually most poignant to me because you're sandwiched in between some interviews with a couple coaches, and they all talk about the most important part of execution is preparation. And I think a huge myth, I'm going to allow you to tell me if it's the same in soccer and in hockey, which are your, more experienced areas, but I can tell you for basketball, this idea that we're improvising, or that like when we call a timeout and we draw up a play on the sidelines that our players have legit never seen it before.
Right.
No, we prepare for everything. It's a dress rehearsal. Practice is a dress rehearsal every day.
Yeah.
So is it similar what you're asking for your players, that we are repeatedly working on mental practices so that when you are in crunch time, all I'm actually saying to you is, hey, remember what we've been working on? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, when you're drawing up plays, right, you're just kind of reminding everyone, and then you're maybe adjusting things based on what you saw the other team do, but
Right.
you're not rewriting the script here, right? These are things that we've practiced. It's like I'm just instilling in you the confidence that you've already done this. You know exactly what you need to do. We're going to take a breather. We're gonna write it down and show you, but you're prepared for this moment that is in front of you. It's just, I think it's same across the board. I would guess for most sports. Right? You're just adjusting.
Yeah, and you know what? It almost sounds like we're trying to figure out how to make those small adjustments for the athletes when they're in heightened states. Mm-hmm. Which brings us to, I think, another very buzzworthy word, which is triggers. While I certainly haven't done the work that you've done in this field, I'm an avid reader. I constantly talk to my favorite coaches in the basketball sphere about mental performance, and I at least assume that there's a certain amount of stoicism that we're trying to build into athletes, specifically when it comes to stimulus and response. We're working on the space between stimulus and response. So I imagine because of that you are constantly trying to help athletes spot their own triggers. Like, hey, I noticed that this thing happened in you, and then I lost you. Once you've identified a trigger in that athlete, what happens next?
For my athletes, we go through a reset routine, right? So something to refocus on. So you know that we go through the stages of what it would look like, what your body language starts looking like, the things that you start telling yourself, a number of things that your body's now going through, your mind is now going through, because you feel yourself, I missed 2 layups. Now I'm starting to really feel the heat. I suck, this, that. These are the things that you're telling yourself. You have to be able to recognize that right away. And then you only have a few seconds because games are fast, right? There's not a lot of time to sit and dwell and think, what can I do to get myself through this? Go into it with a routine that you're already ready to do. So it's something physical. It's something, it's a deep breath, and it's telling yourself something, right? So for example, if you're a soccer player, you might not need to adjust your sock, but it's there to as a habit to tell you, all right, I'm resetting my sock because I know that I need to refocus. So I take a deep breath, I adjust my sock, and I just say a word or two to myself, like, calm down. Right? Now I'm triggering it to myself, okay, what happened. I'm not going to let it ruin the rest of my game. And then you just keep going. And every time you feel yourself starting to slip from maybe a green zone to a yellow zone, right? Because there's 3 zones. Our green zone is like where we start off and we're ready to go. We're running all over the field. We're communicating with our teammates. We're happy to be there. Things start slipping, not going our way. We start sliding to the yellow zone. I'm fine if you can work through the yellow zone, but if it's a very short range from from yellow to red, we got to snap you back. So we're always trying to stay between green and yellow. So recognizing it is great. Doing something about it is better. So the recognition of, I feel myself starting to slump. I'm not standing as tall. I was sprinting. Now I'm kind of jogging. These are all things you have to start recognizing about yourself and say, all right, I got to pull myself back. I'm going to just reset, right? Take a deep breath, tell myself something positive, do something physical, and I'm back in it.
This is an awesome jumping point, because what you described when you described that typical green zone, to me, I would consider that to be a flow state, where like you're sort of instinctively doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're so locked into the game that everything kind of slows down for you. That's how I would describe flow. One of my favorite athletes, quick shout out to Amy Fisher, was the only athlete to this day I've ever worked with who could verbalize to me pregame that she was in a flow state. And much like any human being on earth, she wasn't in the flow state 100% of the time. That's not really possible. But like, she's the only athlete I've ever worked with that would come to me pregame and be like, I'm on right now. And then like we would run plays for her and she would shoot like 75% from three. And like, that was just her thing, and just sprint and outwork everybody. And I'm sharing Fish as an example because that to me is flow state. I would love to know, between the athletes you've worked in and your own experience around sport, what am I missing? When it comes to that locked in athlete that's in flow, what are the sort of flow best practices for Coach Kristen Tullo?
I think first I want to take a step back, because you said something I think is important, that just because she's in a flow state doesn't mean, just like all the other athletes, we're not going to stay there the whole time, right? And mental toughness, I think, gets misunderstood. It is not always being able to do the hard things and not show emotions, you know. And I almost hate the term mental toughness, because it gives this connotation that like, I'm so tough, nothing is going to like hurt me, nothing's going to get me upset. I'm always going to be just like straight faced, ready to go. And like, okay, that's not the reality of things, right? So mental toughness is just being able to bounce back when things aren't going 100% how you want it, right? You can show me emotions. I love it. I love emotions. I'm a very emotional person myself, but I need you to not lose yourself to those emotions, right? I need you to take that deep breath, process those emotions into what's going to happen next. So I didn't want to not mention that, because I don't want people to think that mental toughness means always being 100%, not being able to show how you're really feeling or what you're really thinking.
You're not a character on like the Fast and Furious 9 is basically what we're getting at. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Athletes are real humans, right? We are going to feel things, do things, and they're not always perfect, and that's perfectly fine. It's all about the reaction to what's happening, which I think is the most important.
Does flow then mean that your bounce back time is basically the highest it can be?
Yeah, I mean, you could watch a tape of any athlete, like the best on their team or the best in the league. They're going to make mistakes through the game, right? We always focus on the mistakes we make, but if you sat down and watched tape of someone else, you're going to notice their mistakes. The biggest difference between those athletes and other athletes is that they didn't let those 2-3 mistakes turn into 10 mistakes where they completely shut down. You can make mistakes. I don't care. And when I used to coach, I would tell my athletes all the time, the only thing that's going to piss me off is if you don't try.
Yes.
Fall down. I do not care if you fall down trying to learn how to skate backwards. I'm going to be more upset if you just completely ignore that one step and not try.
The phrase I used to use with my players a lot was compounding interest mistakes. And I want to give, just because this tends to lean towards basketball, I want to give any basketball listeners a really practical example of what I'm hearing from you. You take an open three, you miss it. So you're frustrated. So you immediately commit a defensive foul, right? And then the next play, you want to make up for it because now you're in your head about the foul and the miss, and you immediately take an ill-advised shot, right? And then you're on defense, and now you're just completely broken, and you stop talking to your teammates, and you miss a defensive assignment. And your reality is, I've completely, fallen apart, and this is horrible. The coach's reality is, nobody actually cared about your missed shot, but you just caused a 4 to 5 point swing. That's a problem.
Right, exactly. The mistake is not the issue ever. The worst part is that if you don't react in a way that's going to be beneficial for you or your teammates. I think that's probably one of the best takeaways anyone listening can have. Missed a shot, we don't care. Just go back into the next play without hanging your head.
So this is really important to me. How can coaches be better for athletes in those moments? Because those moments happen. I don't know how much the average person sees this, because maybe the average person sees, oh, that was a good defensive play, or that was a tough thing. We're talking about things like this happening dozens and dozens of times every game and every practice. So what can coaches do better to keep that balance between green and yellow?
I think it happens outside of the game, right? I think that the relationship, the communication that you have open, and the accountability you give to your team is going to show in those moments when the pressure is on, they missed a shot. Are they nervous because of what you might say to them? Are they nervous about something surrounding that? I think that being able to have communication is everything, right? In marriage and in business and in everything, communication is always key, and it's the same thing with your athletes and your players. So I think one of the things that coaches can do is make sure that outside of practices and games, you have those open communications and you stick to check-ins, right? Everyone likes the idea of check-ins and, oh, we're going to have this meeting, we're going to have that meeting. Make sure that you're actually doing those meetings. Understand like where your athletes are at right now, because maybe so-and-so just broke up with their boyfriend or their girlfriend and like they're already just like, in a slump. And then you don't have to ask them these personal questions, but you hear these things around the room. It's just an example of being able to kind of meet them where they're at, right? So you're doing these check-ins. Do they have a big test coming up? Are report cards coming out? Are acceptance letters from colleges coming out? So keeping these lines of communication open and kind of just having a good understanding of your athletes as a human is going to help you be able to support them how they need to on the court. I don't think that there's one size fits all for that situation. I think that getting to know your athletes, understanding how they like to communicate, what they respond best to with communication is going to help you when you see your player miss that three. All right, I know how she is or what she's going through right now, and this is the support that I need to give to her. And this is not babying. It's kind of just helping it's helping develop your athletes based on not assuming, well, this is how I did it with this person, so I'm just going to do it with that person. I think that that's also kind of a misunderstanding. It's like, well, I'm not there to babysit. I'm not there to like baby my athletes. You don't have to, and the athletes don't want to be babied either. They just kind of want to be understood.
I think that quest for understanding is one of the most overlooked parts of college athletics, and I'm very grateful, seriously beyond words, looking back at it, that all of my mentors in the basketball profession strongly encouraged that I looked outward for advice on leadership best practices and not just basketball coaches. So some of my favorite books on navigating leadership change and optimizing a workspace are literally about optimizing workspaces, not college basketball teams. And one of the things they talk about constantly is the power of enabling people to act, making them comfortable enough that they feel like they could challenge your process, making them comfortable enough to feel like they could go to you with anything. And it's amazing the impact that can make on the culture of a basketball team. I think the other thing that's really important to what you just shared is, again, we're talking about prep. You know, we're not talking about isolating specific moments. We can identify a specific moment and then remind them of the prep we've done, but not vice versa, right? It's very interesting to me.
And I think another part of the communication between coaches and players is understanding what their role is. I think that sometimes athletes are a little harder on themselves because they don't fully understand what they should be doing or what's expected of them, because the athlete is like, well, I have to score points because points is what matters, right? But not every kid on the team is going to get to be the leading scorer. And I think that everyone has a specific role. Like, you're put on this team for this or that, and your role could change from team to team based on systems and coaches and what have you. But I think one of the first things that I would encourage athletes to do and coaches to do is to make sure that you guys are both clear on what's expected of you as an individual. Right? We have team expectations a lot of the times and what we expect of the team. I think we need to do the same for the individual athlete. And that's just another way to make sure that you guys are constantly checking in and meeting those expectations.
I love that. Now I want to flip it.
All right.
I know.
Challenge accepted.
Yes. I want to highlight an anecdote, if you're comfortable sharing it, that you talked about with me a couple weeks back off air. You talked about preparation for coaches, being able to identify specific things as they come. None of us are know-it-alls. Well, don't we have to challenge the young athletes to accept the fact that they don't know everything either? Because I think that is something that a lot of coaches struggle with.
Yes.
Are you willing to share a fun story about that?
I'm willing to share it because this had to be at least 6 years ago, and it is still like one of the freshest memories in my mind. It is just burned in there, and I wish I could forget it, but I can't. But it's a perfect example of a lot of the issues that we see between maybe parents, coaches, athletes. So I had told you the story about one of the soccer teams that I'd been coaching a few years ago. First day of practice, keeping things loose. Everyone's kind of warming up, stretching, and we're just going around asking everyone, like, what are you most excited about this season? What are you most excited about to learn or do or experience? Because it was a new team for a lot of these girls. And everyone's giving these great answers. And then I get to this one girl, and she just casually stands there and goes, I don't know. I already know everything. And I was just like, she's obviously kidding. She's in eighth grade. She can't possibly think she knows everything about the sport of soccer. So I was like, there's nothing that you can think of. And she was just like, I've been playing soccer. I know everything. I'm like, okay. I'm not speechless too many times in my life. I think that moment I was just like, all right, let's go to the next girl because what? And my initial thought was like, what a disservice. Whoever told this girl that she is she's peaked, she's plateaued, she knows everything she needs to know. What a disservice they did to her because if you want to talk about buzzwords, we're going to say coachable, not a coachable athlete, right? Because the mentality already was just like, you're not going to be able to show me anything I don't already know. And I think anyone listening, and we both know that is far from the truth.
The more I find out, the less that I know.
Yes.
So how do we, aside from, trying to be humble and receptive to new information, are there best practices to avoid being, quote, another know-it-all?
Just understand that none of us know everything, right? I tell people all the time, clients or just anyone, if we're not learning something new every day, we're just not paying attention, right? Because there is something to be learned every single day, no matter what it is, what you're doing. And you can be in a profession for years. You can be playing a sport for years. There's always going to be something that you can learn, and it's not necessarily a tactical skill or anything like that, but just, I never thought of that, or I never realized that. That's interesting. And then you kind of rethink plays a different way or how you're going about things. So I think keeping an open mind and understanding that if you are learning, it's not because you suck or you didn't know or whatever. You're allowed to not know everything. People that think they know everything are the ones we should be a little nervous around.
In all walks of life.
Oh, for sure. When I said that, I wasn't even thinking about sports, to be honest. It's like, you say, and like I said, I'm a personal trainer. I have clients that I see all the time. And one of the things that we always say about personal trainers is if you find the personal trainer that has the answer to every one of your pains or questions, they're not trustworthy. Not everyone knows everything. If a client has a problem and they ask me, I might know the answer. I might just say, I'm not the best person for that, and I don't want to misspeak. So I will find out for you, and I'll talk to someone about it that would know better. But I don't need to have every answer, and we shouldn't expect someone to have every answer.
I love that so much. We're in the home stretch here. I want to shift to a few about the recruiting process itself. I'm imagining some of our more creative listeners have already been able to conceptualize how some of your talking points could also impact some of the pain points and stressors they experience in the recruiting process. But I want to do my due diligence and spell it out for them. 2, the hypothetical high school student that's doing all the right things, but just has not gotten the attention that potentially they deserve yet and is hearing a lot of things from a lot of different people. What do you say to that kid?
I think you need to trust your circle. Always have people, maybe 3 people that you trust the most to give you feedback or to give you an honest advice or opinions. So I think the first person is always yourself. Understand what you really want, what you need, and what you're looking for. And then 2 people, maybe it's a coach or a mentor or a parent or a close friend. I think when you have those 3 people, those are the people that you can trust. And then when you're hearing, like you said, you hear a lot of different things from a lot of different people. A lot of it is noise. You stick to those 3 people, yourself being the loudest voice, and you just trust those 3 key people in your life.
I love that. Knowing that your work focuses so much on the sort of end result being more grit, more resilience, more toughness, real like leadership aptitude. I want to run a specific data point in my research by you. Now, you knew in advance that I wasn't going to tell you what the data point was, okay?
Right.
So here is what I decided to do in my research. I was just kind of sitting back, and as I was putting some of my materials together for work, just sort of recollecting that all of my favorite players that I had coached and the kids who I felt made the biggest impact in the locker room were never the most skilled players. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to sort of turn that into like a hypothesis and test it. So I asked 50 college coaches the following question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being they literally cannot compete at your level. They don't belong. And 10 being they are an All-American at your level. What is the lowest performance level out of 10 that you would take on your team, that you would offer to be a part of your team if you knew the kid was a 10 out of 10 attitude and unconditionally trustworthy and reliable? The average response from both scholarship and non-scholarship level coaches was a 5 out of 10. And now I want to give you the kicker before I ask for your input on this. There was also a correlation between how low a result the coach was willing to give and whether or not that coach had repeatedly been to the NCAA tournament, won their conference and advanced to the NCAA tournament. If that was the case, the answer was closer to a 4 out of 10.
Okay.
Given your experience, what we've been discussing here, I would love to get your gut reaction to that because it's a pretty staggering fact.
I love these coaches. I'm surprised to an extent, but also happy to hear that because I would rather a team full of 5s than a team full of 10s all day. And people think I just say that, but no. Attitude, everything like that, energy, what you bring to this team off the field, off the court, ice, whatever. I'm a little surprised, but I'm also, like I said, I'm happy to hear that.
Do you think, because I hear that and I go, I want this kid that's maybe been told you're not talented enough to play at level X, but has a 10 out of 10 attitude. I want that kid to go for it. Like that's kind of my thing. And if a kid displays to me that they have that attitude, I'm like, don't let anybody tell you no. None of this information is final. Go for it. Would you take away something similar, especially because you're constantly trying to shape the attitudes of young people? Would you agree with me in that philosophy?
I feel like in all of my coaching at every level or whatever it was, whether it was coaching on a team, consulting for a team, doing the mental performance training with athletes, I feel like I'm always more interested in we'll say like the middle of the road kids, right? They're not super talented. They almost fall under the radar, and they are often the most important pieces. And one of the things that drives me crazy is when coaches name captains based on popularity or talent, because those are often the kids that don't give a crap about the underclassmen or the new kid or the person that that's just not to their level. That's something that always drives me crazy. I was talking with someone the other day actually, and she was talking about her son's team or a team. It's not even her son's team. It was a team at her son's high school named their captains, and they didn't name one of the seniors as captain, but he's the best player on the team and he's a senior. And I was like, does he deserve to be a captain? And she was like, not really, and I was like, no, there's no buts. Like, the parents can be upset, and I've gone through that. Naming captains. I mean, the conversations that go on there, I would love to share these stories with you off air, because they are quite interesting. But I'm sure you can understand it all. But I mean, there's so many intangibles, we'll call them, that teams need, right? Because not everyone, like I said before, not everyone gets to be the star player, and you need the girls and the guys that are playing a little bit different game.
This was what a unbelievably valuable conversation. And I mean, I'm obviously selfishly very excited to continue collaborating with you. Your information is below in the description, so people will be able to look and click and see how to contact you. But for people that don't like looking and clicking, how can we find you, Kristen Tullo?
I am, fortunately or unfortunately, always on Instagram at Coach Kristen Tullo. I have a website. It's thinkstrongplaystrong.com. There's ways to work with me there. And anyone can just reach out to me on DMs on Instagram or through my website, and I'm always happy to chat with parents, athletes, or coaches.
I cannot understate this enough, because I talk to two bodies of people most often. I talk to college basketball coaches who are currently doing this, and I talk to high school recruits. What we have talked about for the last 45 minutes is mission critical to your success as a recruit and your continued success transitioning to college athletics. It's not easy, and mental mastery is extremely important to your continued growth and success. Coach Kristen, thank you so much for your time. This was a 45-minute knowledge grenade.
I hope so. I hope everyone enjoys it and is able to take something from it. Thank you so much for having me, Jared.
That's going to do it for another episode of the Nail the Recruiting Process podcast. For more information about my Nail the Recruiting Process project or the work that I do with individuals or teams, please visit www.nailtherecruitingprocess.com. If you have ideas for podcast guests, questions that you'd like to have answered on the show, or you just want to reach out and say hi, please feel free to email me anytime at recruitinggear@gmail.com. That's the word recruiting, the word gear, all one word, at gmail.com. Finally, follow me on social media at Nail the Recruiting Process on Instagram. That's my home base for all news, updates, and content. Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.